We don't seat your kind.
He didn't argue. He didn't pull out a phone. He just walked into the rain.
Stay right there, brother.
22 minutes later, that Maître D was going to find out exactly who he'd thrown out.
I have a reservation.
This is how it started. 22 minutes earlier, on a rainy Tuesday in Manhattan. You don't belong in a place like this. The Maître D stepped forward, blocking the doorway, his chin tilted up like he was measuring the air above the man's head. We have a dress code here, sir. I'm going to ask you politely to leave. The man in the worn black hoodie didn't move. Didn't argue, he just looked at the Maître with those tired, patient eyes that have seen too much of the world to be surprised by it anymore. Have a reservation. The Maître D actually laughed. Not a chuckle, a laugh. Loud enough that the couple at table 7 turned their heads. Sir, I think you're confused. This is Legui. We don't seat people who look like you. We just don't now, please, before I have to call security. The man nodded slowly. Okay. He turned and walked out into the rain. 3 blocks. That's how far he made it before his phone rang. 22 minutes later, that Maître would be on his knees in the kitchen pantry, gripping a wine list like it was a life preserver, and the only thing he'd be able to say, over and over, was, "Oh God, oh God, oh God." Yeah, he picked the wrong man, the wrong hoodie on the wrong Tuesday night. Let's get into it. Let me set the scene for you. Upper East Side, Manhattan. October. Specifically East 64th Street. Half a block off Park Avenue. The kind of street where the sidewalks are swept twice a day, and the buildings have doormen with white gloves and waiting lists that take years to climb. The kind of street that smells like wet stone and expensive perfume when it rains. And on the night this all went down, October 14th, it was raining. Not pouring, just that slow, cold New York drizzle that makes the cab lights blur and the pavement shine like polished glass. Legui door was tucked between an Italian boutique and an art gallery that only sold paintings to people who didn't ask the price. The restaurant itself didn't even have a sign out front, just a small brushed brass plaque next to the door, no bigger than a paperback book, with 3 engraved Michelin stars, and the name in tiny script. If you didn't already know it was there, you wouldn't find it. That was the whole point. 3 Michelin stars, 18 tables, a 6-month waiting list for anyone who wasn't already on the private guest registry. The tasting menu ran $480 per person, wine pairing extra, service charge already included, so you wouldn't have to embarrass yourself by leaving cash on the table. The kind of place that didn't ask what you wanted. It told you what you were going to have. And you said thank you. And the man standing at the front of this house, the one in the perfectly tailored midnight blue suit, French cuffs, polished Oxford shoes, silver cufflinks shaped like tiny anchors. His name was Preston Whitlock, 46 years old, Maître at Legui d'Or for the last 9 years. Before that, 4 years at a similar place on the Place Vendôme in Paris. Before that, the Connaught in London. He had what he liked to call standards. He used that word a lot, standards, like it was a religion, like it was a wall that kept the wrong kind of people out so the right kind of people could enjoy their evening in peace. Preston had a rule. He'd told it to every junior staff member who'd ever worked under him. You can teach a man to use the right fork. You can't teach him to belong. Whatever that meant. He thought it sounded wise. It mostly sounded like something a man says when he spent 20 years deciding who deserves a chair and who doesn't. And the woman who'd hired Preston 9 years ago, the one who let him run the front of house like a private kingdom, her name was Vivian Ashcroft, general manager, 51. Sharp blonde bob, glasses she didn't need, a Yale's hospitality degree she liked to mention in the first 60 seconds of every conversation. Vivian believed in the brand, the mood, the vibe of the room. And anyone who threatened the vibe, by her definition, was a problem to be removed quickly and quietly, before the other guests noticed. She and Preston were a team. They thought of themselves as gatekeepers, curators, protectors of something rare and beautiful that the rest of the world wouldn't understand. Hold that thought, because in about 30 minutes, the entire world was going to understand exactly what they were. There was a third person working that night who matters here. His name was Caleb Monroe, 24 years old, junior server, 6 weeks on the floor at L'Aiguille d'Or after 2 years at a much less fancy place in Hell's Kitchen. Caleb was from Akron, Ohio. He still couldn't quite believe he'd landed this job. He paid attention. He kept his head down. He didn't ask questions, and on the night this happened, Caleb was about to learn that keeping your head down has a price, and the price is whatever piece of yourself you trade for it. Now, the man in the hoodie, the one who'd been dismissed at the door like a stray dog, I'm going to tell you who he was, but I want you to picture him first. Black hoodie faded almost to charcoal, worn at the cuffs, dark jeans the kind with a little fray at the hem from being walked on too many times, black motorcycle boots scuffed at the toes, a small black backpack, not a brand name one, just a plain black canvas bag with a single buckle, salt and pepper hair, more salt than pepper now, hanging just past his ears, a neatly trimmed beard, tired eyes, calm eyes, the kind of face you'd walk past on a subway platform 100 times and never look at twice. That was the point. That was always the point. Because the man in the hoodie was Keanu Reeves. Yes, that Keanu Reeves. And on that particular Tuesday night, October 14th, he'd come to L'Aiguille d'Or for a quiet dinner with a man named Marcus Holloway. Marcus was the executive chef at L'Aiguille d'Or, 42 years old. Born in New Orleans, trained in Lyon, 3 Michelin stars to his name, his face on the cover of Food and Wine magazine twice. And 11 years ago, before any of the stars, before any of the magazines, Marcus had been a struggling line cook in Los Angeles, working a double shift at a place near the studio lots. And a quiet customer in a black hoodie had left him a tip so generous. It had paid 2 months of rent during a stretch, when his daughter was sick and his savings were gone. They'd stayed in touch. Quietly, the way real friendships work. No social media, no press. Just 2 men who occasionally called each other to check in, to ask about the family, to talk about nothing in particular. And earlier that week, Marcus had asked Keanu if he was going to be in New York. Keanu was. He was in town for 3 days, finishing some looping work on a film. Marcus said, "Come by the restaurant Tuesday, 8 o'clock. I'll cook for you. Off the books. My table, just you and me." So Keanu came. He came directly from the studio. He doesn't change clothes. He almost never does. That's not a costume. That's just who he is. And he walked through the rain to East 64th Street, opened the discreet brass door, and stood in the soft golden light of the L'Aiguille d'Or vestibule. And Preston Whitlock looked up from his reservation book, saw the hoodie, saw the boots, saw the wet hair sticking to the man's forehead, and made a decision. He didn't ask for a name. He didn't check the reservation book. He didn't say good evening. He just decided. 7:58 p.m. Preston stepped out from behind his small cherrywood podium. He moved smoothly, the way he always moved, like a man who knew his role and loved playing it. He approached Keanu with a thin, polite, surgical smile. "Sir, can I help you?" Keanu pulled the hood back off his head. "Hi, I have a reservation. Marcus is expecting me." Preston's smile didn't change, but something behind his eyes did. He looked Keanu up and down, slow, deliberate, the way a person looks at something they've already decided not to like. "I'm afraid we don't have you in the book. Maybe you've come to the wrong place. There's a sandwich shop 2 blocks down." Keanu smiled, soft. Tired, the kind of smile that says, "I've been here before. I know how this goes. I'm going to try anyway. Could you check under the name Holloway?" Marcus said he'd put it under his name. Preston didn't move toward the book. He didn't even glance at it. "Sir, we have a dress code here. Jackets required for gentlemen. No denim. No casual outerwear of any kind. I'm sure you understand. Now." 2 things happened in that moment. The first was that Caleb Monroe, the junior server, was standing maybe 10 feet behind Preston, near the entrance to the dining room, folding napkins into the small, complicated swan shapes the restaurant used for the tasting menu. And Caleb looked up. He looked at Keanu's face, and he recognized him. Instantly. No question in his mind. The second thing that happened was that Preston noticed Caleb looking, and Preston's eyes flicked just for a second toward Caleb. A warning, a get-back-to-work look, and Caleb, 24 years old, 6 weeks into the best job he'd ever had, looked down at his napkin and didn't say a word. That right there. That's the moment. That silence. That tiny, almost invisible second when a young man knew the truth and chose to fold a napkin instead. That's the moment Caleb is going to spend the rest of his life thinking about. Keanu didn't push it. He could have. Could have pulled out a phone, made a call, embarrassed Preston in front of the room. He didn't. He never has. He just nodded slowly, the way he does. Okay, sorry to bother you. He turned, walked back through the door and stepped out into the rain. Preston watched him go. Then he turned to Caleb and said, quietly, almost amused, can you imagine? I really thought he was going to argue. Caleb didn't answer. Preston went back to his podium, opened his reservation book, ran his finger down the page, and saw 2/3 of the way down, in neat black ink, an entry for 8 p.m., 2 guests. The name beside it was Holloway, chef's table. Preston looked at the entry for maybe 3 seconds. Then he closed the book. Out on the sidewalk, Keanu walked to the corner. He didn't go to the sandwich shop. He didn't go back to his hotel. He stood under the awning of the closed art gallery next door, pulled his phone out of the front pocket of his hoodie, and dialed Marcus. Marcus picked up on the second ring. Hey, brother, you here? Keanu was quiet for a moment. Then he said, hey, listen, I think there might be a small problem at the door. Marcus was in the middle of plating a delicate piece of black cod with a koi butter sauce. He set the spoon down. What kind of problem? Your Maître won't let me in. Marcus stood very still. The kitchen behind him did not. 12 cooks, the hiss of the salamander, the clink of porcelain, a line cook calling out a ticket, the sounds of a 3-star Michelin kitchen running at full speed at 8 on a Tuesday night. But Marcus, in the middle of it, was completely still. Then he said 3 words. Stay right there. He took his apron off. He didn't fold it. He just dropped it on the pass. He walked out of the kitchen, through the swinging door, into the dining room, and then through the dining room, past the bar, past the host stand. And Preston Whitlock looked up from his reservation book to see his executive chef, the only 3-star chef in the building, walking toward him with an expression on his face that Preston had never seen before in 9 years of working together. Marcus did not raise his voice. He just stopped in front of the podium. Preston, there's a man standing outside in the rain. Did you turn someone away in the last 10 minutes? Preston straightened up, adjusted his tie. He gave Marcus the small professional smile he gave to difficult guests. Chef. There was a gentleman. He was not appropriately attired. I followed protocol. Marcus blinked. Slowly. What's his name? I'm sorry. What was his name? The man you turned away. What was his name? Preston paused. He mentioned someone, Holloway. I didn't catch his own name. He wasn't dressed for the room, chef. He wasn't, you know. Marcus turned. Slow. Deliberate. He looked at the reservation book on the podium. The book Preston had closed without reading, and there, 2/3 of the way down the page, in black ink, was the 8 o'clock reservation. 2 guests. Holloway. Chef's table. Marcus put one finger on the line. Did you check the book? Preston didn't answer. Did you ask his name? Nothing. Marcus turned and walked to the front door. He stepped out into the rain. He saw Keanu under the awning of the gallery next door, half a block down, his hood up against the drizzle, hands in his pockets. Marcus walked the half block. He didn't say anything when he got there. He just put a hand on Keanu's shoulder. Then he said, "Brother, I am so sorry. Come inside." Keanu looked at him. He looked tired. He looked the way he always looks. Then he said, "Soft, you sure?" Marcus said, "Get inside." By the time they walked back into L'Aiguille door together, Preston Whitlock had figured it out. Not all of it, but enough. He'd looked at the photograph on the dust jacket of the celebrity guest book under the podium. He'd looked at the man standing next to Marcus, and every drop of color had drained out of his face. Marcus walked Keanu past the podium. He didn't look at Preston. He didn't speak to him. He walked Keanu directly into the dining room, to a small reserved two-top in the corner by the window, the chef's table. Caleb Munro still folding napkins, looked up as they passed. His eyes met Keanu's for a quarter of a second. Caleb couldn't hold the look. He looked back down at his napkins. Keanu didn't say anything to him. Didn't have to. Vivian Ashcroft came out of the back office about 90 seconds later. Someone had texted her. She walked into the dining room with the calm, controlled walk of a woman who has handled crises before and intends to handle this one. She glanced at the corner table. She saw Marcus pulling out a chair for a man in a wet hoodie. She saw 3 guests at a nearby table whispering to each other, and one of them lifting her phone, holding it just below the table edge, screen turned outward. Vivian's stomach turned over. She walked straight to Preston, who was still standing behind the podium, frozen. She didn't even greet him. She just said in a low, tight voice, "Who is that?" Preston's mouth opened, then closed, then opened again. "Vivian, I think. I may have. That may have been." Vivian leaned in closer. "Who is that?" Preston said the name. He said it the way a man says a word in a language he doesn't speak, like he wasn't quite sure he was pronouncing it right. Vivian closed her eyes for 1 full second. Then she opened them. "Get in the back office now. Don't say a word to anyone. Don't go near that table. Don't even look at that table. Go." Preston went. In the office, Vivian was already on damage control. She wasn't thinking about the man in the corner. She was thinking about the room. She was thinking about the woman with the phone. She was thinking about the 80-something guests in the dining room, and how many of them had cameras, and how many of them had already posted what they saw. She turned to Preston. "Tell me exactly what you said." "Word for word," Preston told her. "Most of it. Not all of it." He left out the laugh. He left out the line about the sandwich shop. He left out, "You don't belong in a place like this." Vivian listened. She didn't interrupt. When he was done, she said one sentence. "You may have just ended this restaurant." Preston blinked. "I followed the dress code, Vivian. He wasn't in a jacket. He had no reservation that I saw. I was protecting the room." Vivian stared at him. "The room, yes. The vibe, the standards. We have Vivian." Vivian held up a hand. "Stop talking." She left the office and went out into the dining room. She walked over to the corner table. She put on her best, warmest, most contrite smile. She introduced herself to Keanu by her full name and title. She said, "Mr. Reeves, on behalf of L'Aiguille d'Or, I cannot begin to apologize for the way you were treated tonight. There has been a misunderstanding. I would like to make it right in any way that I can. Tonight is on the house, of course. The wine, the pairing, everything. Please, sit, enjoy. Marcus is preparing something special for you." Keanu looked at her. He didn't say anything for a moment. Then he said, "Soft, it's okay." Vivian leaned in slightly. The smile tightened. "I am so very, very sorry. Could I ask one favor? Could we keep this between us?" The man at the door. "He's been with us a long time. He had a bad night. He's not a bad person. I'd hate for this to be something that goes anywhere. You understand?" The whole table seemed to freeze. Even the rain seemed to slow down for a second. Keanu looked at her, really looked at her. "Those tired, patient eyes," he said, very quietly. "Lady, I'm not going to put anything online. That's not who I am. But you should know. 3 different people in this room already have." He nodded gently toward 2 tables away, where a woman was still holding her phone at an angle, and a man across from her was openly recording. "And that's not on me. That's on you." Vivian's face didn't move, but underneath the makeup, every muscle in it went tight. She nodded once. She said, "Of course. Thank you. Enjoy your dinner." She turned and walked back to the office, and as she walked, she pulled her phone out of her pocket. She opened a search engine. She typed 3 words, Keanu Reeves Restaurant, and the first result, posted 42 minutes earlier, was already a Reddit thread with 8,000 comments. The title was, "Just watch Keanu Reeves get turned away at L'Aiguille d'Or in NYC because he was wearing a hoodie." The video had been uploaded by a guest at table 7. 28 seconds, crystal clear audio. Preston's voice ringing out across the vestibule. "You don't belong in a place like this. We just don't seat people who look like you." The video had 13 million views. 13 million views in 42 minutes. While Preston was standing at the podium, telling himself he'd followed protocol. While Vivian was telling Keanu, it had been a misunderstanding. While Caleb was folding swan napkins and trying not to think about the moment he'd looked away. The world had already seen the whole thing. Vivian stood in the back office, staring at her phone. The room around her seemed to tilt. She read the top comment. She read the second. She read the third. Then she stopped reading. She sat down in the chair behind her desk. She put her hands flat on the wood. She didn't move for a long time. Out in the dining room, Marcus brought out the first course himself. A small porcelain spoon with a single perfect bite. Hamachi, yuzu kosho, a thread of olive oil pressed from olives grown on a hillside in Liguria. He set it in front of Keanu. He said quietly, "Brother, I am so sorry. I should have been at the door." Keanu shook his head. "You couldn't have known. I'm just grateful you came out." They ate. They talked. They talked about Marcus's daughter, who was in her second year at NYU. They talked about a book Keanu had been reading. They talked about a motorcycle Marcus was thinking of buying. They didn't talk about Preston Whitlock. Not once. Because, here's the thing. Keanu had moved on. He'd moved on the second he stepped back into the restaurant. He didn't carry it with him. He didn't need to. But the rest of the world was not moving on. The rest of the world was just getting started. By 10:14 p.m., while Keanu was on the fourth course, a butter-poached lobster with a beurre blanc that Marcus had been refining for 6 years, the story was on the front page of 3 news websites. By 11:30, it was the top trending topic on every major social platform. By midnight, the New York Times had reached out to Leguidor's press contact for comment. Vivian Ashcroft did not respond. By 2 a.m., a journalist had identified Preston Whitlock by name. By 3 a.m., a second journalist had pulled 3 of Preston's previous workplaces and was making calls to former colleagues. By 6 a.m., a former busboy from a restaurant in Paris, where Preston had worked 9 years earlier, was on a video call with a reporter, describing in calm detail how Preston had refused to seat a North African family with 2 small children one evening and had referred to them, when they were out of earshot, by a slur. Preston had been quietly let go from that restaurant. No public statement, no press. The family had not pursued anything. They'd just gone home. My second former colleague, this one from the Connaught in London, came forward with a similar story. A young black couple, an anniversary dinner, a reservation that mysteriously could not be found. By 9 a.m., a former server at Leguidor itself, a woman who had left the restaurant 18 months earlier, posted a long thread describing a pattern. She named 4 specific incidents. She named 2 guests by their initials with their permission. She used the word humiliated 3 different times. By noon, the count was 11 separate accounts of Preston Whitlock turning away or mistreating guests over a 15-year career. 11 people over 15 years whose stories had gone nowhere because none of them had been famous. 11 people who had walked out into the rain or the snow or the bright sunshine of a Tuesday afternoon and gone home and told no one, or told someone who couldn't do anything about it, or told someone and been told, "Let it go, it's not worth it, you'll just hurt yourself." 11. That's the part that should make your chest hurt. Because Keanu Reeves was number 12, and he was the only one anybody had ever heard about. By Wednesday afternoon, 24 hours after the incident, Leguidor had received over 4,000 cancellation requests. The phone lines had crashed twice. The reservation email account had filled past capacity. 3 corporate sponsors of the restaurant's annual charity gala had pulled out by 5 p.m. The Michelin Guide had issued a brief, careful statement, saying they were aware of the situation and reviewing. Reviewing. That word, in the world of fine dining, is the word you do not want to hear. Vivian Ashcroft had not slept. She called an emergency board meeting for Thursday morning. She didn't sleep then either. On Thursday morning at 10 a.m., 5 board members and 2 outside counsel sat around the cherrywood table in the private dining room of Leguidor. Vivian sat at the head of the table. She presented a summary of the situation. She presented the social media analytics. She presented the projected revenue loss for the quarter. She presented 2 letters from major shareholders demanding action. And then she paused, and she said, "We have to terminate Preston Whitlock. Effective, immediately." The board agreed, unanimously. Preston was called in at 11:30. He arrived in another perfectly tailored suit. Charcoal gray this time. His hands were shaking. He sat across from Vivian and the two attorneys. He did not get a chair at the cherrywood table. He got the chair across from the cherrywood table. Vivian did not look at him while she read the prepared statement. Termination for cause. Conduct unbecoming of the L'Aiguille d'Or standard. Violation of the restaurant's stated non-discrimination policy. Material misrepresentation in his interaction with a confirmed guest. Effective immediately. Final paycheck would be mailed. Health insurance would terminate at the end of the month. Preston listened. When Vivian finished reading, he sat very still. Then he said, quietly, "I followed protocol. I was protecting the brand. There was no reservation in front of me." Vivian finally looked up. "Preston." "There was. You closed the book." He blinked. "I did not." He said it like a child says he didn't break the lamp. "We have the security footage. From the camera above the podium. We watched it this morning. You closed the book at 7:59 p. approximately 12 seconds after Mr. Reeves walked away." Preston opened his mouth. Opened it again. He didn't speak. Vivian slid a single page across the table. "Sign here." Preston signed. He left the building through the staff entrance. There were no reporters there yet. There would be by Friday. He went home. He sat on the edge of his bed, in his small one-bedroom apartment in Murray Hill, still wearing the charcoal suit, and he stared at his hands for almost 2 hours. Vivian Ashcroft kept her job for another 6 weeks. She survived the initial firing of Preston. She survived the first wave of press. She did not survive the second wave. Because once a story like this catches fire, the questions don't stop at the Maître d'. They climb. By the third week, 2 more former L'Aiguille d'Or employees had come forward with statements about the culture Vivian had built. 2 specific quotes were attributed to her in writing. One of them was, "We curate the room. That means knowing who fits." The other was longer and worse. By the 5th week, the board had received a letter signed by 41 current and former employees calling for new leadership. Vivian was offered a quiet exit. She took it. She left without a press statement. She received a severance package she was not legally entitled to in exchange for signing a non-disparagement agreement. She moved to a smaller city. She did not return to fine dining. The board of L'Aiguille d'Or brought in a new general manager from outside the industry. A woman named Helen Kavanagh, who had spent 10 years running operations for a nonprofit that placed formerly incarcerated workers in hospitality careers. Helen rewrote the dress code. The new policy fit on a single line. "Guests are welcome." The new training program included a 4-hour module on dignity, judgment, and the cost of assumption. Every employee took it, no exceptions, including the dishwashers, including the porters, including the board. The Michelin Guide, after their review, allowed L'Aiguille d'Or to retain its 3 stars on the condition that the restaurant remain in good standing with its new policies for the following 12 months. They were watching. Everybody was watching. Marcus Holloway stayed on as executive chef. He requested one change to his contract, a clause giving him the authority to override front-of-house decisions involving any guest in his dining room. The board agreed. He never had to use it. Caleb Monroe. Remember Caleb, the 24-year-old junior server who looked down at his napkins when he should have looked up. Caleb went home that Tuesday night and didn't sleep. He sat on the small futon in his shared Bushwick apartment, and he stared at the ceiling, and he replayed the moment over and over. The look on Keanu's face, the look on Preston's face, his own hands folding a napkin into a swan. On Wednesday morning before his shift, he wrote a 1-page letter. He printed it at a copy shop on Atlantic Avenue. He brought it to work. He gave it to Marcus. The letter described what he had seen and heard at the door on Tuesday night, word for word, including the laugh, including the sandwich shop comment, including the line that Preston had quietly omitted from his version of events. Caleb signed his name at the bottom. He added his phone number. Marcus read the letter. Then he looked at Caleb for a long moment. Then he said, "You didn't have to do this." Caleb said, "Yeah, I did." The letter became part of the internal record. It was cited in Preston's termination paperwork. It was cited in the board's review of Vivian. Caleb didn't tell anyone he'd written it. He didn't post about it. He didn't talk about it. 8 months later, when Helen Cavanaugh promoted him to head server of the chef's table section, he wrote her a thank you note in pen on hotel stationery. He never mentioned the letter. And Keanu. What about Keanu? He finished his dinner that Tuesday night. He had the cod. He had the lobster. He had a small chocolate dessert with a single fresh raspberry on top. He drank 1 glass of red wine. He hugged Marcus at the door. He walked out into the rain. He did not give a single interview. He did not post anything online. He did not return any of the 17 calls his publicist made over the next 3 days, asking if he wanted to make a statement. The next morning, he was back at the studio looping dialogue. The day after that, he flew to Berlin for another project. 2 weeks later, on a late-night talk show, when the host tried to bring it up gently, Keanu just smiled, that tired patient smile, and said, "You know, people have bad days. I hope he's okay." The host moved on. The internet did not move on. The internet noticed exactly what Keanu had done by saying so little. The internet noticed that he had not asked for Preston Whitlock's job. He had not demanded an apology. He had not turned it into a personal grievance. He had simply walked out into the rain, called his friend, accepted the apology that came, and gone on with his life. The internet noticed because the contrast told the whole story. 6 months later, on a quiet Sunday morning in April, Preston Whitlock walked into a small church basement in Sunnyside, Queens. He sat in a folding metal chair in a circle of 9 other people. None of them famous, none of them rich. Most of them had lost something, a job, a marriage, a reputation, a version of themselves they couldn't get back. The group leader, a woman in her 60s named Ruth, asked if anyone wanted to share. Preston, for the first 3 weeks of attending, had not shared. On this particular Sunday, he raised his hand. He stood up. He cleared his throat. He said, "My name is Preston. I was a maître at a restaurant in Manhattan. I used to think my job was to protect what was beautiful from what didn't belong. I used to think I had standards. I used to think a lot of things. There was a man last October. I don't think I need to say his name. Everybody knows the story. The thing I keep coming back to, the thing I can't stop thinking about, is that he wasn't angry. He just looked tired. He looked at me like he'd seen me before. Not me specifically, but people like me many, many times. And he just walked away. And I have to ask myself, how many other people walked away from my door looking like that? Over 15 years, how many? I think about it every day. I don't sleep much anymore. I'm not asking for sympathy. I wanted to say it out loud. To people, because I owe at least that much. Preston sat down. The room was quiet for a long time. Ruth said, "Thank you, Preston." The meeting moved on. Preston went home. He cried that afternoon for the first time in 20 years. Not because his career was over, because of who he had been when he had a career. That's a different kind of crying. That's the kind that comes when you finally understand. Not when you lose something, when you understand. Some lessons don't come with a refund. Some lessons just sit with you for the rest of your life and make you a quieter person. L'Aiguille d'Or is still open. It still has 3 Michelin stars. Marcus Holloway is still the executive chef. Helen Cavanaugh is still the general manager. The new dress code still fits on one line. Caleb Monroe is still there too. He's the head server at the chef's table now. He's 25 years old. He still folds the swan napkins for the tasting menu. When new junior staff come on, he sits them down on their first day, and he tells them a story. He doesn't use Preston's name. He doesn't use Keanu's name. He just says, "Listen, there was a night here once. A man came to the door in a hoodie. Somebody made a decision in about 3 seconds that took the rest of his career to undo. The decision wasn't about the hoodie. It was never about the hoodie. It was about a habit of looking at a person and deciding who they are before they've said a single word. We don't do that here anymore. We don't do that anywhere if we're doing it right." And then Caleb hands the new server an apron, and the new server ties it on, and the shift starts. That's what changed in that building. Not just a policy, a habit. The slow, quiet kind of habit that runs underneath everything and decides who gets a chair and who gets sent into the rain. That's what got rewritten. Not in a press release. In the kitchen. In the dining room. In a one-page letter a 24-year-old man printed at a copy shop on Atlantic Avenue. One person at a time. And here's the thing I want you to sit with. Because I made all of this up. Every name. Every street. Every plate of food. None of it is real. But the shape of it, the way a man in a hoodie gets sized up at a door, the way a maitre d' decides who belongs and who doesn't, the way 11 people walked home in the rain over 15 years and told no one. That shape is real, it happens. Today. Right now. In a city near you. To people who don't have a Marcus in the kitchen, who don't have a friend who'll walk out into the rain, who don't have 13 million strangers ready to share their video. They just go home. They take off the hoodie, they hang it on a hook by the door, and they don't talk about it. Because what good would it do? If this story made your chest tighten, even a little. That's the reason. If you've ever been on the other side of that door, you already know. And if you've ever been the person at the door, the one with the smile and the standards, maybe tonight is the night to ask yourself how many people walked away from you, looking not angry, just tired. Because that look, that tired, patient look, that's the one that hurts the most when you finally see it for what it is. Hey, look, I made this story up, every word, but the way my chest got tight writing it, that part's real. Because the thing under the story, the thing about who we let in, and who we send away, and why, that part doesn't need a screenwriter. That part is already happening somewhere. Tonight, if this hits you, hit that like button. Share it with someone who needs to hear it. If you're not subscribed yet, you know what to do. I'll see you in the next one.